There are many stories in the United States that have a lot of phantom experiences, but none as terrifying as this. This is the story of the one engine they called the Devilish Mikado. Our story begins in 1911 at the Baldwin Locomotive Works in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Now, we all know the story of Southern Railway 4501, from her rescue from scrap to her appearance in the movie October Sky. But there's a lesser-known, more obscure locomotive. This engine will be known as Southern Railroad 4201. Now, as the original class, as 4501 was the first, was originally going to be 485. However, 4201 will become a spare locomotive as a gift to the Southern Railroad from Baldwin. However, unlike her twin sister, which was painted in the Southern Railroad's green, 4201 was only painted in Neor black. This was most likely due to the engine being incredibly similar to 4501, and so they wanted to make her unique compared to 4501. However, the Southern Railroad kindly decided not to go with the plan of being offered the 4201. So, when the 4501 went to the Southern Railroad, 4201 was sadly kept in the Baldwin Locomotive Works as a switcher locomotive. Her black color gained her the nickname the Black Sheep of the Great Locomotive Works of Baldwin. 4201 would spend most of her life switching out new locomotives and rolling stock out of the locomotive works. She wasn't particularly noticeable, likely due to her overwhelmingly black paint, but she was known for her 5-chime steam whistle, which echoed around the factory. No railroad was offered 4201, and sadly the old girl was kept in the shops. However, that was until the very end of 1913. There's a very small town, smaller than Callinsburg, in Pennsylvania known as Lorcaster. This town was bypassed by the Pennsylvania Railroad. However, it was given a new sort of life. The Delaware, Lackawanna, and Western decided to build a line to Lorcaster as its own separate branch line to connect with the PRR. And this is where our locomotive would gain a new future. When the line was opened in 1912, it had only 2 engines. A 480 Camelback that the Delaware, Lackawanna, and Western gave to the line, and a PRR Vandalia Line K Pacific class. The line will be known as the Lorcaster and Lackawanna Railroad. However, there wasn't a lot of locomotives, and it needed a larger, more powerful locomotive. Now at this point, 4201 was kept in the shops, but something odd was going on about her. Tools will be often going missing, and people will but just be found staring at 4201's headlamp for no reason. No one knows why, but, well, at the time no one thought about it. And since she wasn't in use, the Lorcaster and Lackawanna Railroad called up and asked Baldwin if they could buy the 4201. And they agreed. Despite the issues with 4201, the L&L wasn't told about this. And so, for an undisclosed cheap price, 4201 was bought by the Lackawanna and Lorcaster line. And she was driven the 36 miles to Lorcaster under her own power. And once she was put to work, she proved to be a very powerful locomotive. Once put to work, she was the most powerful of the 3 locomotives. So, just like the other 2, the Lorcaster and Lackawanna repainted 4201. Her boiler was painted dark orange, while most of her black was kept. But she gained orange stripes on her tender, and had L&L painted on her tender, to signify her new life on her new railroad. And she was renumbered from 4201 to just Old 42. Lorcaster and Lackawanna 42 became a reliable locomotive, pulling logs to the sawmill and hauling the sawboards back to the exchange yards where a PRR locomotive would pick them up. She could also pull passengers and freight, just like her counterpart 4501. However, things began to go awry with 42. Tools will end up going missing, though no one really thought about this. It was just that, well, 42 must have been demanding work somehow. However, as we all know, starting in 1914, the Great War happened. The Lorcaster and Lackawanna was forced to focus more on their building equipment for the military effort. This would have a bad effect on 42. She was being used more and more and becoming more worn out and tired, but the engine was still going strong. No one thought that this would be a serious problem. So, when a small scrapyard was built not far away from the line's main terminal at Lorcaster, 42 would be found hauling scrap metal to the old scrapyards, kinda similar to what she did at Baldwin. But instead of helping new locomotives, she was taking old pieces of scrap to be melted down and turned to, basically anything that would be used for the war effort. The worn-out Mikado was forced to do all this work, while the other two locomotives did the smaller jobs. It seems that they became too reliable on 42. However, they really didn't think of the consequences. But 42 worked like it was just a normal locomotive. That was until 1915. May 7th, 1915. Lorcaster and Lackawanna number 42 was scheduled to take the premier passenger train of the line, the Lorcaster Flyer, to Philadelphia, a small Philadelphia station. The train consisted of one baggage car, one combine car, one mail car, and 5 passenger cars, with an observation car at the rear. 42 had hauled this train numerous times, and so, with a blast of her whistle, she set off from Lorcaster for the final time. "4201 was puffing along the line at a terrific pace. She was right on time, and nothing seemed to be the problem. However, something went wrong. At the small sawmill town of Woodlar, there was a bridge being built, part of the L&L's extension project. Many men were working on it that night. The foreman was checking his watch when he felt he could hear a noise, a rumbling sort of noise. He looked behind him and gasped. There came old 42 with the Lorcaster Flyer, flying around the bend, heading straight toward the bridge. The foreman cried out, "Old 42's on the wrong track!" and ordered everyone to get out of the way. As 4201 raced past them, they could hear the engineer screaming, "Brake, will you?" It seemed something had gone wrong with the engine's brakes. The men could only watch in horror as the train fell out of the unfinished bridge and into the swamps below. The damage was horrific. The entire train had plummeted into the swamps below. Everyone on board was killed except for 2 passengers in the rear observation car, along with the conductor. The engineer and firemen were killed instantly. There was nothing really much left to be salvageable from old 42. It was heartbreaking, to say the least. After the crash, the remains of Lorcaster and Lackawanna 42 were sheeted up and headed to the scrapyard where she had worked so many times before, to be melted down and turned into heaps of scrap. But how could this have happened? It was later revealed that 42's brakes were not working on the day of the crash. They had been working all day, but they thought it wasn't a big deal. The L&L had been working 42 too much, and this took a toll on her. Now, why was she on the wrong track? Well, it was because that the foreman, not believing that any train would be coming,